Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Justice Marie-Josée Hogue says Canadians have the right to an election that is free of coercion and free of covert influence, but she says that was undermined in the election of 2019 and 2021. Now, Hogue is the woman leading Canada's public inquiry into foreign interference. She tabled her interim report this morning and then addressed members of the media.
Acts of foreign interference did occur during the last two federal general elections, but they did not undermine the integrity of our electoral system. Our system remains sound. Voters were able to cast their ballots, their votes were duly registered and counted, and there is nothing to suggest that there was any interference whatsoever in this regard. Nor did this foreign interference have any impact on which party formed the government in the two most recent elections. Nonetheless, the acts of interference that occurred, some of these acts have been established while others remain only suspected, are a stain on our electoral process and impacted the process leading up to the actual vote.
Well, with more on the Hogue Commission's interim report, we're now joined by Canada's Public Safety Minister, Dominic LeBlanc. Minister, thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Michael.
Now, your report says, or rather this report says, that your government will need to do some work to reestablish public trust. In the foyer today, when you talked about it earlier, you did mention that something was going to come soon. What exactly can Canadians expect in the coming days? Will it be legislation on the creation of a foreign agents registry?
So we recognize for a long time that one of the things that malevolent foreign state and non-state actors seek to do is exactly that, diminish confidence that Canadians have in their democratic institutions. It's a challenge for other Western democracies as well. So we certainly take what the Commissioner said in this regard very seriously. And as you mentioned, I referred earlier today to legislative actions that our government will be taking. I put on notice today in the House of Commons our intention to introduce legislation in the coming days to better strengthen our ability to counter foreign intelligence. But as you know, Michael, you've been around Parliament for a while. Once legislation like this is on notice, out of respect for Parliament, we're not going to discuss the contents of the bill, but it will be introduced in the coming days. And once it's introduced in Parliament, perhaps I can come on your show and discuss the details.
Well, for the record, you're always welcome on our show, so happy to talk about that. But listen, you know...
Maybe we'll do it next week.
Okay, I look forward to that. But why has it taken so long, Minister? Because, you know, when you talk about legislative changes, but on the Foreign Agents Registry alone, you know, that's something that's been talked about even before allegations of Chinese interference surfaced. My recollection of it goes back even to the days of the convoy protests. So why has it taken so long to even get that one piece up and running?
And again, this is it's not a simple undertaking. Diaspora communities have understandable concerns that legislation in this regard needs to be drafted in an appropriate way, that you deal with, for example, things like lawyer-client, solicitor-client privilege. There's a whole series of complicated issues, so it's not a simple undertaking, but it's an important one and it's got to be done right. But as I said, the legislation that we hope to introduce in the House of Commons next week will really seek to strengthen our ability to detect and resist and defeat attempts at foreign interference. So I look forward to discussing those details with you when the legislation is tabled.
Okay. Listen, let's get back to the Hogue report itself, though, because, you know, this interim report, it also talks about intelligence assessments not reaching the intended recipient or being misunderstood by those who received it. And we heard that in testimony, even before today's interim report. Have there been any changes already made or coming down the pipes to ensure that that process gets better?
Yeah, of course there have been. I mean, this was a challenge, Michael. You'll remember last spring, last winter, it was clear that the ability of intelligence services and the RCMP in some cases to properly share information with either political responsible persons like myself in the case of these national security agencies needed to be robust and assured. I am confident the Prime Minister has made some very, very clear directions known to the national security agencies. I see it operationally in my work with CSIS and other partners. I'm confident that some of the challenges that existed previously have been corrected, and I'm confident that the director of CSIS and others that I talk to often about these issues and others are sharing with me the relevant information and more importantly, putting it in a context as well. So I've learned since I became Public Safety Minister, Michael, the difference between a piece of sort of raw intelligence that hasn't been corroborated, hasn't been tested against other intelligence products, and isn't, to your point, your question was about assessments. Those are obviously valuable products because they put the information or the intelligence in a context that people like myself that aren't security experts can understand and can work with partners to ensure that we're taking the appropriate steps. So I have every confidence that those measures are in place. But again, this was the interim report of the Hogue Commission. Madame la Juge Hogue, Justice Hogue, will be at the end of this year bringing in her final report, which will, we hope, and in terms of reference contemplate this, contain recommendations as to what the government and Parliament and others could do. So we look forward to those recommendations as well. And if we can strengthen any of these measures, of course, we'll want to do so.
Okay. You know, before we're done, interestingly enough, as this report was being tabled and Justice Hogue was speaking to members of the media, we got news that the RCMP arrested 3 individuals in connection to the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. You know, the Prime Minister did say that there were credible allegations that Mr. Nijjar's killing was carried out with the involvement of the Indian government. As you and I are right now talking about foreign interference, what message do you hope the arrest of these 3 will send out to any foreign actor or entity?
So obviously I'm very happy with the work that the RCMP has done on this difficult case. The arrests today were an important part of that independent police process. I also noted that the Assistant Commissioner for Federal Policing in the Pacific region made clear in his comments that there were distinct and ongoing investigations that were underway, including the potential links to the government of India. So this is not the final efforts of the RCMP. Their work is ongoing, as they noted themselves today. So I think the message is that we take transnational repression very seriously. It's a challenge I've discussed, including as recently as today with the U.S. Homeland Security Secretary and the British Home Secretary. This is not unique to Canada, but Canada is a rule of law country with effective police forces that will investigate and prosecutors that will prosecute those that seek to perpetrate these crimes. And we'll continue to look for ways that we can renforcer, that we can reinforce legislation or resources that police and other partners have to make sure everything possible is being done.
How important will successful prosecutions be to back up the Prime Minister's allegations about Indian government involvement?
So I don't want to prejudge what a criminal trial might do or the evidence that will be introduced in a criminal trial. I think it's important to note that it's in the hands of the judicial system now, which is appropriate, but it's also important to note that the RCMP have confirmed that their work is ongoing and these separate and distinct investigations are continuing. So I think we should have every confidence that they'll do this work effectively.
Mm-hmm. You know, ahead of next week when you make the announcement, I do also want to squeeze in one more question here about something we heard from Mr. Chong, because in Mr. Chong's discussion, he was raising the fact that there was a private conversation between the Prime Minister and Commissioner Hogue, in which Commissioner talks about the Prime Minister making the statement that unendorsing your candidate in Toronto's Don Valley riding north would have a direct electoral consequence in a race that Liberals were expected to win. Does that reinforce what Conservatives have been saying, that the actions of your government were influenced by the seat count that you were eyeing in that campaign?
No, and coming from the Conservatives, Michael, it's not particularly credible. Mr. Poilievre, when he was minister responsible for democratic institutions, had public warnings from CSIS over a decade ago about foreign interference. The Conservative government at the time did absolutely nothing to put in place measures to counter, to detect and disrupt this. We're the first government to have done that. When I asked Mr. Poilievre a year ago if he regretted that. He said, of course they didn't do anything because it wasn't in their partisan advantage to do so. So I think that we have shown that any incident of foreign interference is something that we take seriously. And we've stood up measures, that we've expanded, that we've adjusted, we've evolved. And the Hogue Commission report is a very important step along that path. The National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians has done good work, and there are other groups that are reviewing this. So we'll continue to be guided by that advice and not the partisan comments of the Conservatives.
Minister Dominic LeBlanc, thank you for the time this evening.
Thanks very much, Michael.